everybody. How's it going?
Good.
We're going to get started. Lucas will join us in a minute, but we'll just jump in. Oh, you're here. Wait, come back up here.
I know, but I want to see it.
Okay, that's fine. So my name is Calley, Hastings. I'm going to moderate the panel today, and I'm from the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. I'm the program manager for the Farm and Forest Viability Program. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. We're going to do intros. But before we get started, this is actually kind of a nice smaller group, so we can really get into details and questions as we go, a little bit more conversationally possibly. But just curious why folks are here in the room. Has anyone here applied for a grant before? A couple people?
Yeah.
Has anyone ever received a grant?
Yeah.
Okay. Has anyone ever written a business plan? Awesome. Who has an up-to-date business plan?
Good.
Some medium.
Working on it.
Okay, that's great. And then I'm assuming everyone would like to know more about how to apply to grants and what kind of money is out there. So this is kind of going to be a mix of some details about actual grants that are out there, the types of things that are required, and throughout the whole process from application to kind of reporting at the end. But then we're also going to hear from Lucas and Heath, who have received grants, and like how it actually affected their businesses and what did they do with that money, or what are they going to do with it, because that's really the most interesting part of this whole process. But you got to know that that's a bolts to actually get the money, so we want to make sure everyone leaves with key information around that. And we also have a handout with awesome resources that Mariah put together. It looks a lot like this.
It's located on that black table.
Yeah, make sure to grab it. It's kind of the whole spectrum of things out there. So to start off with, we're just going to do some intros. And we'll start with Lynn.
Hi, thanks for being here. I'm Lynn Schimoler, and I work with the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative, also known as Working Lands Enterprise Fund. It's a state-funded and sometimes philanthropically funded program with a governing board who strategizes on investments to forest and ag businesses around the state of Vermont. So I help the board strategize and walk them through their funding prioritization every year. And then once that process is finished, I help to translate into eligible uses into requests for applications in the form of grants and contracts, but today I'm going to talk about grants applications.
I'm Heath Bunnell. I own Kirby Mulch here in Vermont. I also own HB Logging in New Hampshire and HB Logging and Excavation. So, and I received a grant, Working Lands grant, and it was a positive experience for me, for sure.
I'm Steve Bick. I'm a forest economist, and my work, particularly my Vermont business, I sort of operate like an extension professor, but without the burden of a university or a lot of meetings. So I do a lot of what I would call soft money projects. I apply for grants and cooperative agreements, so I kind of know that world, because if I have an idea, I usually have to find a partner and find a way to fund it. And I also work, and I work mostly in the forest product supply chain. So the people I work with, people I meet through VHCB, and also through the Vermont Forest Business School, which is a kind of a continuing ed program that I run, I end up knowing their businesses pretty well and want to help them. So I help them apply for grants and write proposals.
Lucas Jenson. I own the Treehouse Hardwoods Millshop, and we also have the Vermont Butcher Block Company. I'm a 4-time applicant, 2-time grantee of the Working Lands thing, so I've got some experience. And I'll tell you more about things in a little bit.
Awesome. I'm Mariah, Noth. Calley and I work together at the Farm and Forest Viability Program at the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. Lots of words to throw out at you, but we focus in a little bit different areas. I specifically focus on a program called the Rural Economic Development Initiative, more words. And that is really about helping communities, nonprofits, and specifically working lands businesses access complex federal grants. We do that by helping folks connect with grant writing consulting or other types of technical assistance to really help them get through that grant process in a successful way.
Can everyone hear everybody?
Not that great.
Okay.
I'm sitting right up in
Catherine's saying so. Please speak louder.
Maybe we all come up a couple feet and anyone can move up closer. The sound in here is a little
It
tricky.
could be me, I mean, it is me too.
I'm also, if we don't even and feel free to come up closer if you want. So Calley, Hastings again, Farm and Forest Viability Program. So our program essentially does business planning with farm and forest businesses throughout the state, and we work with about 100 to 150 businesses every year. Many, when you drive around the roads of Vermont, most of the ones that you look at have often been in our program one year or another. It's been around for 15 plus years. The forestry one is a little bit newer. I think that's 5 years old. But essentially, our role is to find forest businesses and farm businesses that are looking to get into business planning, work on their financials, do cash flow projections, scenario planning, enterprise analysis, and help them put together plans so they can then run their businesses the way they want to, reach their goals. And it's also great because you get a business plan at the end, and that is often required for grants and business planning, grants and loans. That's not the primary motivator for our program. We like to kind of get in early with businesses to work on planning, and then then they're kind of working on it for a couple of years, and that puts them in a position where they're stronger to apply to different programs. But if you know anybody who's interested, they can always contact me to see about working with a business advisor. But it's essentially, the model is one-on-one, in-depth business coaching, where the business meets with an advisor, usually like once a month for 3 to 4 hours over a 1 to 2 year process. And then we kind of like to be a part of that, the life cycle of the business, so that we can also help with succession planning and transition planning as well. So many businesses will start with us when they're kind of a couple years into their business, and then we see them again 10 or 15 years later when they're trying to sell their business or maybe transitioning to the next generation. Any questions on those programs so far? Okay. So kind of the lay of the land for today. Mariah is going to get into the landscape of grants, kind of big picture, federal, state, need-to-knows, and then Lynn Ellen will speak about the working lands grants, and Steve will speak to his different programs and his experience, and then we'll talk with the grantees about their experience getting grants and applying for grants, and then we'll do some key takeaways and Q&A at the end. I think if you have questions that you think you might till the end, great. If you have ones that you feel are really important to ask during, feel free to raise your hand. And yeah,
Slides. We're going to do this the analog way, so we'll advance our own slides here. So I'm here to chat today about kind of the broad spectrum of grant opportunities available. This is going to be a really bird's eye view, and again, I'm available, and our contact information can be made available to have really in-depth conversations with any individual business who wants to talk about a particular project or particular goals you have. That's my job. I love to do that, so please do feel free to reach out. I can leave my cards on the black table over there. I also want to note that we'll keep it pretty high level. I will give you guys some examples of the different kind of buckets of funding opportunities that we're going to go over today. But again, we do have this packet we've developed that is kind of a point in time. It's not totally exhaustive, but includes a lot of the kind of preparation resources that can help folks get to the place where they can apply and be really competitive for a grant, and then a pretty decent listing of a variety of grant and particularly favorable loan opportunities that we are aware of at this point. And that packet is over on this table, so feel free to grab one before we go. But yeah, I will dive right in. So I hear a lot from the folks I work with, and this ranges from very large businesses to very small businesses to organizations to municipalities. Grants, that word can be very scary for folks, and so it sounds like some folks in here have had some experience moving through that process, which is great. And I also meet a lot of first-timers. I meet a lot of folks who've applied for one type of grant but have no idea how to apply for, let's say, a large federal grant, and just feel like it's just out of their wheelhouse. It might not be for them. I don't think grants are for me. And I think that that's probably one of the biggest myths I hear. There are so many different types of opportunities, as many types of businesses that you can think of and products out there in the forest industry. There are at least that many type of opportunities that they can access, and that can really help with their business growth and development. So again, not one size fits all. I think this cartoon really sums it up. but that there are, I would say, I've kind of developed these bucket areas that say that this doesn't cover everything. Today we're not going to be completely exhaustive, but just wanted to kind of run through how we kind of frame it out in terms of what types of opportunities are out there, and that it's not just necessarily that, that giant application packet that you have to then go through a lot of work on a website to apply to, though those are also opportunities that you can access. So different types of opportunities. One bucket is the do you qualify style of funding. That includes, basically we have these funds to offer for a particular purpose. Does your business qualify for it? If so, please fill out the application on time and we will deliver you those funds. We'll get in a little bit more to that in the future slides as well. But then we have also low and no interest loans. We have kind of, again, that style of grant that I was just describing earlier. That's kind of what people traditionally think of as the larger competitive style grants. Larger amounts of funds, more work. Again, we'll dive into that a little bit in the next slides. And then we also have, I won't dive into this category as much today, but there is this kind of really broad, wide-reaching category of philanthropy, of crowdfunding sources like Kickstarter and GoFundMe. And then in your local towns, there's a variety of activities that go on, a variety of organizations and support groups that want to see your businesses succeed. So like I said, I won't dive into that because that can be very specific to your communities, but just wanted to note that that's kind of a whole other bucket area that we could do a whole other presentation on. So again, I might move kind of quickly through these bucket areas, but I want to get back as we get into the Q&A and really discuss with folks if you have particular questions. But this first bucket, again, is that kind of do you qualify funding, and this includes a variety of incentives that are available as well. So basically, as I kind of dive more deeply into each of these buckets, I'm just going to give you a quick, again, bird's eye view, what's involved in this type of application, and then some really specific examples of that type of funding that you could access here in Vermont if it's applicable to you. So this type of funding is really, again, it's less competitive. It's not about trying to really convince someone of something or to say that your project is better than someone else's. Usually this looks like, we have this pot of funds for this particular use and we have it until it's gone. And so usually that involves a specific application form. It may include you needing to describe in some sort of narrative how you meet those requirements, but usually that's pretty limited in this style of funding. You will likely need to include, specific costs if it's a particular program. Say that, hey, we support forest businesses with this type of permit. Describe what type of permit that you're applying for that you would need to seek funding for. So again, usually pretty straightforward, but asking for some specifics there. And again, these are really on a first come, first served basis. So usually these funds do run out. They don't always last forever. It may be an annual opportunity, or it may be a one-time funding, especially as we get into this landscape of federal dollars coming through the state. There will be a lot of one-time funding out there, so definitely important to keep your eyes open and find these really kind of low-hanging fruit opportunities. And so again, another thing to think about this is if you do receive this type of funding, I called it an award in this slide, but it can look like a lot of different things, that you may need to, you will need to figure out basically if it's going to come to you up front. Are you going to immediately get that funding to use to do the thing you said you would do? Or are you going to need to keep invoices and seek a reimbursement? And again, I think that is definitely a key piece across the board with all types of funding, but also specifically speaks to this kind of lower hanging fruit funding. So some examples which folks may or may not be familiar with. So Forest Parks and Rec right now, at least as of I last checked their website, they do still have this funding available. The department in Vermont has a value-added forest products permitting assistance fund. So I believe those grants are about $500 to $5,000, and they can help value-added forest products businesses that need some sort of permitting, and that can be, again, in a variety of things for a variety of needs and have a variety of costs. But it's pretty straightforward. I checked out the application online. That staff is really accessible to help you through that. And so really it's are you a business that qualifies? If yes, please fill out the form. Please fill it out as soon as you can, because that money, there's only, I believe there was $20,000 left in that pot as of May. So one of those things that may or may not return, but it's a really great program, and that if you are eligible, you should apply for. Another great example is, which is a little bit different style of funding, is Northern Community Investment Corporation, which is a great organization actually based in the Northeast Kingdom. They offer technical assistance funding. So instead of harder costs like equipment or construction, that will cover softer costs like marketing, web design, branding, and a variety of other kind of professional services that could be really useful for your business or for your organization. They work with nonprofits and municipalities as well. But that they have a form of a cost share. So again, it's, do you meet the eligibility requirements? Talk to their staff, fill out the application form that they have available, and then depending on the size of the business and the type of need that you have, they can cover up to 65% of that cost, which can be a really great way for folks to, update their website, be able to have online order fulfillment, lots of exciting things that you can do with those funds. Another great example that I find is kind of a hidden gem that maybe folks in this space are aware of, but that I find a lot of people don't realize is out there, is Efficiency Vermont and other kind of, whether it's energy groups or other kind of affiliated entities like that around the state. They are able to offer a variety of rebates for energy efficient equipment. One of the really cool things they offer is a rebate on reverse osmosis machines for maple businesses that is over $3,000. So again, it's like if you're looking to do this work anyway and you would like a very significant discount on whatever you're doing, that's a great fit. They also offer energy assessments of your business to help you find ways to save money, which again, in a way, saving money over time acts like a grant in a certain essence. So just wanted to cover that as well.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
Anyone in this room already familiar with those? Or are those new? Someone new? Okay.
Awesome. We love when there's some new ones. That's great. So kind of second bucket, which again does not sound quite as fun as the word grant, and may even in some cases sound scarier than the word grant, loans. So there are a variety. In Vermont, we are actually pretty lucky to have a variety of organizations like some of the folks you heard talking this morning and probably yesterday that offer really helpful financing tools to businesses that are meant to help them succeed and can be a really important part of either covering the full cost of a project or part of a capital stack to make a much larger project happen. And so looking at this type of funding, what's involved there? Again, we're talking, it's always going to be an application form in some format. Again, want to connect with whatever that group is, whatever that lender or organization is that has that funding, and really talk through, are you fit for it? Because the last thing we want business owners to do is to waste their time. We know you guys got a million jobs going on, and that we want people to go to things that they have a shot at and will be successful with. Business plan, as Calley was mentioning during intros, business plan and financials, so key to getting any sort of financing, loans really in particular, that's huge. I'm sure you guys are very well aware of that. Different types of these pieces of financial documentation, and there are programs like ours that can really help folks develop that, and there are other programs across the state as well that can support folks with putting together that type of information that would qualify for them for this type of funding. And there might also, as you folks I'm sure are well aware, there are other types of documents that kind of fold into this process as well, depending on what you're applying for a loan for. But one thing that's also really key, especially when we think of, there's kind of this category of low interest loans, which are, organizations that have a mission that want to support the growth in the forest economy, might offer, 0% interest or really low, 2% interest or something like that, which is looking better and better as the interest rates go up for other things. But then there is this kind of other category of forgivable loans as well that are coming out as we have this relief funding pumping through the economy. And so those really, in many ways, do act like a grant. So there are kind of these different options, different ways to access, again, this kind of, whether it's gap funding for a project or can cover the whole thing, these can be a really useful resource. But what's key in that category of kind of the forgivable loan is making a plan for how you are going to report on that. Because usually if there's a forgivable loan, they are asking you to prove that you did what you said you would do. And so making sure that you have a plan to capture that and to capture what you spend money on, so that way you can prove to them that we did what you wanted with this funding is really important. Some examples of this type of funding, and again, these are both COVID examples, and so there, like I said, are other types of financing out there that I believe the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund on their table outside has a great capital spectrum graph that has a lot of resources about different capital sources specifically for this industry. But the ones I'm talking about today are with a COVID focus, and because I was like, I'll use them now while they're here. So one of them is the Vermont Community Loan Fund. It's called the Vermont Recovery Loan. So basically that loan is really interesting. It's statewide. Basically all business types and nonprofits are eligible. It can cover a very wide variety of activities, from working capital to investing in equipment to real estate. It covers a variety of topics, but it has to be resolving an issue or impacts related to COVID. And those loans are $5,000 to $75,000, and they are 0% interest for the first 2 years, and then go to a 3% fixed interest rate. So very, like over time, the way money works, that depending on the size of the loan that you do, that could actually act as a grant in many ways to not have to pay that interest. So that's an exciting program. Another one I wanted to mention is the Vermont Economic Development Authority, VEDA, is coming out with a COVID-based forgivable loan program that will be announced, I believe, in early July. A little bit of details still to be determined there, but that one, again, though it's the word loan, if you do actually fulfill all the requirements and fill out the paperwork and follow the rules that they've laid out before you, that will be forgiven. So that will act as a grant, and again, that needs to serve a variety of purposes related to recovering from COVID-19. There are eligibility requirements, and as those come out, our program will be making folks aware of that, and will probably be posting out there, but do keep an eye on VEDA's website. They are really great about posting that information as well. So I'll just move that. And then getting into like the scarier section. I'm very much kidding, grants are not that scary. They are truly, they're an application, just like what we just talked about all the way through, but these are usually for larger scale projects, more about developing a proposal, being really convincing about why you're a really great fit. Funders, they want to see you succeed. They want to accomplish the goals that they've laid out, and so they want to help you do that, and so all you have to do is just be able to share with them that, yes, I want to do what you're doing, here's how my business does that, and it works very well. So looking at this type of funding, so what kinds of things are involved? Again, we're talking application forms, per usual. We are looking at also that there may be some sort of registration process to, like for instance, with a federal grant, you need to be in a system for award management, you need to have a certain employee number that you have to register for ahead of time. Again, that goes back to thinking to start early. We also, in other types of things that are involved in these grants as well, is that there's also usually a work plan component. These grants, again, because they're a level up, it is a commitment, if you are awarded these grants, that you are making to this funder that I will, it's like a contract. I will do these things in this amount of time, and I will prove it to you and give you a report that says I did what I said I would do. So again, thinking about, as you're depositing that application, really laying out that work plan really clearly and making those goals really clear for yourself so you know what your role is and what your part of that contract is. Budget, a little more complicated in this type of grant, but still not totally dissimilar from the other types of funding that we're talking about. That usually you have to fill out a table that they give you a template for. In most cases, sometimes you develop your own, and then you also have to describe it in words. So you have to say, okay, so when I put that line item for the contractor who's going to pour the concrete, this is what he's doing, this is why he's qualified. So it's a lot more simple than it looks, but just like to note that on the budget piece. Again, business and financial information, so critical. Prepare that ahead of time, and you will be a lot more ready and prepared for this style of grant. This type of funding also may require a variety of other documents, and it really depends on who you're applying to, but one of the things we see most often is that folks don't realize that to apply to a federal grant, they may need a third-party feasibility study that is, a consultant that says, yes, this project is great, this business makes sense, and that those also do usually cost money, and that takes time to prepare. So when you get to 2 weeks before the deadline and you don't have that third party that says, that this is a fundable project and that this makes sense, that's going to put you in a tough position to apply to that grant that year. So that's something to really make sure that you read through all of the materials to make sure to know what you need to apply. Permits might be an important component for this. Letters of support, even if they are not requested, I always recommend find, whether it's a business mentor, advisor, community leader, a lender that you've worked with previously, someone who knows you and your business, who can really speak to the fact that you are going to accomplish what you set out to, and that this is going to be great for a lot of reasons. Letters of support do make a difference, speaking from an organization that also makes funding awards as well. So again, another thing to think about is after the award, things get a little more complicated with these larger grants in the post-award time if you do receive a grant. So again, thinking about a grant is really a contract, and there will be a whole signing process that happens after that where, again, you re-agree to the terms that you set and make sure that that makes sense for you. And that the funder also is getting all of their needs met. There's also a whole piece where you've got to manage funds. Are the funds coming up front and that you'll have them to spend? Are the funds that you have to get a line of credit for and then request a reimbursement? Do you have a system to track these funds going in and out and these invoices? That's something to really prepare for ahead of time as well. And then also the reporting piece can be a little bit more comprehensive with these larger grants. That might look like, quarterly or at a certain time period, you'll give them an update, a story about where your project is at. And then it might look like, they also need kind of a financial accounting of how much money you've spent and what you've spent it on. And then at the end, they might want to see, what were the objectives that you had, what were the outcomes that you accomplished. So again, it can sound like a lot, and it can sound intense, but really not the scariest thing in the world once you break it down. Some examples of these type of funds, which could be of interest for lots of folks in this room if they haven't applied yet. USDA Value Producer Grant, which I know Steve has applied to before and has some experience with, so maybe he can touch on that. But that harvesters and tree farmers are eligible for that program. It seems like it's very focused on farmers specifically, but actually there is a category where loggers and tree farmers are very eligible for those grants. And that's basically to support the development and marketing of value-added products that come from the working landscape. So pretty large grant program, can be challenging, but again, once you break it down and understand the parts, it's not as scary as it looks. Those grants can also fund the planning aspect. So let's say you realize that you would have liked to apply for a larger grant, but you've got some work to do to really get to that next stage. They have a planning grant that's up to $75,000. They also have a working capital grant that can pay for kind of all the pieces of the puzzle that create the product that you're developing. So we're talking labor, distribution, packaging, marketing and branding, variety of aspects there that can be paid for, and those working capital level grants, next level up, can be up to $250,000. So it can really be a pretty huge deal for businesses that get those, and we have a lot of success here in Vermont. Rural Energy for America program, REAP, also through the U.S. Department of Agriculture. That's focused on energy efficient systems and equipment. So an example that I give a lot is reverse osmosis machines for sugaring, for maple sugar makers. So that's something that program can fund, but they can also fund a variety of other things. Let's say you're getting a chipper that is particularly efficient, or there are other pieces of where you're manufacturing that could be more efficient. That could be a program for you folks, and that is both, it is a mixture of a grant and a loan, really low interest loan. And then working lands grants, which Lynn will get into a little bit more later on in the presentation. And so I'm just gonna buzz through quickly. I kind of gave some of these ideas throughout the presentation, and we can come back to it a little bit in Q&A, but these are just kind of the greatest hits list of things that to think about and best practices when you're applying for grants. The number one key thing that I will always tell folks is make your funder your best friend, even if they haven't funded you yet. Talk to them, ask them questions, pull them in, really walk them through what you're trying to do. And a lot of times, especially in Vermont, and our USDA staff in Vermont is fantastic, they'll be like, okay, let's brainstorm on this. Let's figure out how what you're trying to do fits the mold of what we can fund. And just really great folks, really helpful. And will pay dividends down the line, for sure. The other really key piece, grants are an open book test. They give you all the answers they want to see right there. So again, as much as it can look like a ton of paperwork and it gives many questions and really scary, your funder wants you to succeed, and they've given you all the information and the scoring criteria that they're going to judge you by. So they've let you know what you're getting into. I think we've gone through a couple of these other ones, but another kind of key piece is that record keeping, both before you start to make sure that you've really given them all the materials they asked for. We see so many people with amazing applications that apply through an online system and forgot one piece, and then that's a very easy way to say, all right, this application, denied, can't look at it because it didn't complete this piece. So that is really important at the beginning, and it's really important at the end when you're looking at how you're going to report on the funds that you've used and making sure that, hey, this is going to happen, they're going to ask you for it, and when they do ask you for it, you don't want to be like, oh shoot, I completely spaced on keeping track of any of this, what do I do? Because that can be a little bit of a hairy situation. So don't be that guy. That's like the motto of that story. Other key piece, reach out for help. Help is available. There are programs like the one Calley and I work for, the Farm and Forest Viability Program, that supports business and financial planning, help folks find resources like this potential list of grants and opportunities out there, and also help with project planning. Having a trusted advisor that's working with you one-on-one can be really helpful to figure out, okay, these are my 6 highest priorities, which one fits funding that's available? Because you don't want to change your project for the funding, you want to find the funding that matches your project. There's also folks like who put on this conference, Vermont Single Jobs Fund, absolutely amazing. They do a similar style of business coaching, but for kind of growth scale, grossing over $250,000 level businesses. Steve's work as consultant is really amazing, and he really helps folks through a process of continuous improvement and can speak a little bit more to what he offers, but also folks like him can help folks develop these proposals, can help folks with the kind of business and financial side of things as well. Another kind of hidden gem that many folks may not know about in Vermont is we have regional development corporations. There are, I believe, 12 of them, maybe a little bit off on that, but they're based all around the state. Their job is to help our economies thrive, and that is you folks. So really they each have a different variety of services, a different variety of things that they offer. Some of them have really great loan funds, some of them have grants. So check out who that is in your area, and that's also linked in the document that is in our handout as well. It has the website taped out if you're interested. And then Vermont Manufacturing Extension Center, also a really fantastic resource in the state that really focuses on the manufacturing side of things. So if that's you, that may be a fit. Grant Writing Assistance, that's the program I manage, Ready, that's kind of where that comes in. We specifically focus on helping working lands businesses based in small communities. That's our eligibility requirement. So folks that are based in communities under 5,000 people, we can connect them with a consultant to really help them through that whole process of identifying grants, applying to them, getting all that information together. If you're a working lands business and you're in a community under 5,000 people, please come chat with me. And then there's also the funders themselves. They may offer assistance with their own grant programs. That's always something to ask about. Private consultants, if for whatever reason, let's say my program either isn't a fit, some other programs aren't a fit or not eligible, there are folks out there, we have one in the audience, that you can connect with and hire on and develop a contract that for a certain amount of funds, they will help you through that whole process. And then there's also folks out there like your accountant, other advisors in your life, people who work for your company that are could be really useful in this process. So definitely lean on them too. So I think Lynn might have just stepped out for a moment, but
let's all actually just stand up for a second.
So I just threw a
I'm not
lot
gonna
at
make you
you.
do anything weird, but just like stand up, stretch a little bit, turn around 2 times, forwards and backwards. Thank you, Mariah. That was awesome. That was really good information.
So it's definitely, it feels like a lot. I know I didn't like totally assuage that little bit of fear there, but just want to let you know the state has so many resources, and that we want to talk to you folks. So we'll try to make it as easy as we can.
All right. You could leave them there. Those are just, it's a nice for Andrew.
I think we're just going to do a little arrow.
These are just some program summaries from FY22, if folks are interested. So I'm going to do an overview of the program, talk about upcoming funding opportunities. Some of my slides are they're outdated because they're from FY22. I typically do a webinar annually for folks. I do one with Viability, I do one with potential applicants, and so I'll just talk through anything I need to update. Funding cycle timeline, what the request for application looks like, some of the documents that you need to apply. I'll quickly go through the Web Grants platform because that's really an intrinsic part of this process. And then some tips and resources, and I think we're going to do question and answer at the very end, not after mine, right? So, I don't have my glasses on, I have to look this way. Working Lands Enterprise Initiative, what is it, who's involved? It represents working lands, farm, food, and forest businesses in Vermont. It is a state-funded program with some philanthropic dollars coming in. To date, we have about $80,000 that came from Vermont Ski Areas Association, which is fantastic. And it's really an agency triumvirate. Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets, Commerce and Community Development, and Forest Parks and Recreation. That makes up our board. Also, 3 ex officio seats, Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund, and Vermont Economic Development Authority. We also have some private and public sector partner stakeholders that are on the board as well. So as I was saying in my introduction of myself, I help the board see through to their funding prioritization every year. Once the state budget is closed, it's usually July, and then they have a symposium, and I help them to translate eligible uses into request for applications. We have a robust review process, anonymous review process. To date, we've awarded $12.5 million. We've leveraged about $17 million, so that's like matching funds or other grants that applicants might be using to kind of leverage the project forward. Fiscal year 23, let's talk about that. We know for sure that there are $1 million in general funds available. It's really great to know that the governor has decided to increase the base. It's been around $594 since I've been with the program, since 2018. This year, he added 406, so it's $1 million. But there are also $2 million in American Rescue Plan Act funds coming in. So FY23, there'll be $3 million available. The ARPA funds, those are federal funds. We're going to have to figure out a little bit of detail with the Treasury guidance. And so I can't tell you right now what those grants will look like because we have to figure out the parameters since it's COVID funds. But I can say with good certainty that will be $3 million for FY23. You can, we'll probably make this slideshow available. There's some hyperlinks in here. The findings section of Act 142 really outlines the foundation of the initiative passed in 2012. It talked about the funding priorities and how that happens. The link here goes to our website. We have impact reports. There's some paper ones out in the lobby, and it's also listed online. That's really helpful for potential applicants just to get an idea of what types of projects we've funded before. So this is really just an example slide. I thought I would share it. The program funds directly to enterprises, but we also fund to service providers. So we fund Vermont Housing Conservation Board. We fund the work of Northeast Organic Farming Association and so forth. Just important for you to know that some of these grants, the life cycle can be a year, it could be 2 years, it could be 18 months. Contracts typically go towards business and technical assistance. Those are usually a year in duration. This slide is an example of the types of grants that we have deployed. Standard business grants has kind of been a hallmark of the program since the beginning. Those range from $10,000 to $25,000. Anything ranging from market development, enhancing production and manufacturing efficiencies, R&D, infrastructure improvements like a delivery van. I am recommending to the board to increase those to cap out at $35,000. What I've really seen is that with inflation and also with just the really amazing thoughtfulness of businesses that are looking to purchase that delivery van, but then also retrofit a wood duck, right? And then also, we probably need to do some window repair. So we're just seeing more diversity of infrastructure improvements, and so I think $10,000 to $35,000 is probably the better range. So hopefully that will happen this year. And then these are two types of grants The board in the past few years has scaled up investments. When I came in, the max was probably around 45,000 to 50,000. In particular for your industry, for the forest sector industry, we know a firewood processor costs a lot of money, right? Heath was a recipient of one of our first scaled up investments in FY19 for the project that Heath Bunnell let him talk about it. But I was really elated this year. We funded up to $250,000 to one enterprise. I think we did 10 or 11. So, eligibility. Enterprises need to be based in the state. You need to have good standing and registered with the Secretary of State. All organizational structures are eligible. Whether you're a partnership, whether you're an LLC, whether you're a food co-op, we actually did fund a food co-op this year, which is exciting. You need to be in compliance with all the various state regulations. And then we have some guardrails around coming back to the well. We do have people coming back and asking, but we try to limit that. So if you asked for a grant $20,000 or below, you can apply every year. But if you're above that, you need to wait a little bit before you come back. This is a funding cycle timeline example, just to show you. So for FY22, I decided to release, and I don't have any of the staff that were helping with this. This is pretty crazy, but we released the standard business, e-processing, and producer association grant all at the same time. So we had like 3 RFAs going out. We always release the request for application information, give folks time to read it, to print it out, to let it percolate, and then we open it for submission a little after that. But then the application also isn't due for a few months. This is one of the most arduous parts of the program, is really trying to best plan this, because operators, depending on if you're a maple producer, if you're a firewood producer, if you're a consulting forester, you have different times of the year when you're busy, right? So we try to hit the sweet spot and get these out during a time period that's going to work for folks. This is just another example. I'm going to pass through that. This is the front page of what a request for application typically looks like. What is important to understand about the RFA when we post it on the website is the RFA guide is there for you to understand all of the questions that we'll be asking when you register in web grants where you're applying for the project. There's sometimes confusion around, oh, this is the RFA, and I'm just going to apply through here. You have to register in web grants first, so I'll go through that in a minute. But I want to give you a snapshot of the front page. Here's some primary components that are in the request for application. Key dates, description of the program information, eligibility, project eligibility. The application in full, meaning the questions that are on the RFA are the same thing you're going to see in web grants in the platform when you apply. So it's good to print this out and have it next to you when you go back into web grants to actually apply. Grant reporting requirements, and the review info and scoring criteria. I do appreciate what Mariah said. That scoring criteria, that's really what we're basing the decision making off of. So even though it's like way down the list on the RFAs at the last page, that's what you should be thinking about when you prepare your business plan, when you prepare your budget, when you prepare your goals and performance measures and expected outcomes. You'll see actually the points attached to those different areas, so you'll have some idea of the weight as you're putting your application together. And
Do
then
you use a rubric for that? For the scoring criteria? Do you have like a numerical?
that's a great question, and no one's ever asked that. We do. We do have a rubric.
Flexible for
Yeah,
each one.
yeah, and you know,
it seems like it would make sense to score that way.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Were you gonna ask something, Keely? Oh, I have 5 minutes left? Okay. I keep that a little mysterious because there's so many thought partners that review the applications, but I like to protect their anonymity.
Right.
Usually in a one-on-one conversation, I give a little more information, but it's a great and fair question.
Sure.
Here's just some grantee expectations that we're looking for. There are shared costs, so there's matching funds. If you're asking for $50,000, we're asking you to put $50,000 in. I do really want to emphasize that the board is very flexible, so there is room for you to put in a match waiver request. I do like to think about distinctions as well between letters of support and commitment. Those are two different things. A letter of support could be your neighbor that says, I support this apple grower because it's bringing these great people to the community. A letter of commitment is a financial tie to your project. And I do give the definitions on the application, but it is really important. I'm a little different in that way than other applications. Those are different, support and commitment. Really gets the board thinking more thoughtfully about their decision making. These are documents that are required with your application, Act 154 water quality, business plan. I wanted to quickly put up a case study. This is from Lucas's recent project. Is the goal clear? Is there a mechanism in place to measure the progress? What are the outcomes or impacts? This all really matters so that the board can make an informed decision for the investment. And it also helps the operator because it's just good project management. When you get award, there's some other documents that are required, W-9, certificate of insurance. This is the portal to web grants. I'm not going to go through it. We're running out of time. But sign up early to be a web grants user because that's just going to help you later on. Some tips for assembling a successful application: start early, compile your documents, finalize your project info. Updated business plans are, it'll be a more competitive application if you have an updated business plan. Set up your stakeholder meeting. Do you need to connect with Cynthia Consultant? Do you need to connect with Vermont Housing Conservation Board to get some help? I just talked about registering web grants. I talked about really reading the full request for applications. There's a web grants application guide, so that's like your instruction how-to for the platform. Consider typing everything on a separate document and then copying and pasting it before you start. You can set up a one-to-one call with me. That's something new. I did about 55 last year between August and October. They were between 15 minutes to a half hour, but it really helped the applicant. It gave them some peace of mind. Definitely available to do that. We also have some contacts of folks within the agency. We're a really small team. This last slide is, or close to last slide, is just some applicant resources. You'll see some partners on here. We do have a Working Lands Business Development Directory. It's actually a matchmaking tool, which we haven't launched publicly, but you can actually go in, identify yourself as a farm or forest person, click the boxes in terms of like what your needs are. I need business planning. I need legal advice. I need Steve to talk to me about throughput. Populate a bunch of fields, press submit, and then out comes different addresses to providers. So that's just something that's there and useful for you if you need it. Thank you.
Thank you. You're up, Steve.
So I have a little bit different perspective to share because I'm not a funder. I'm somebody that works with funders quite a bit. The forest-based businesses are hard to engage, and that's because they're small businesses. Small businesses are hard to engage, and particularly those ones on the end of the spectrum with say 1 to 10 people, because they're busy doing the work. Right? There's not extra staff to do things. Good reason to reach out to other people for help, but they're busy being producers. And the funny thing I hear is like, well, I'm busy running my business. Well, really you're not. You're busy doing the work, being the technician. But to grow a business, you have to be an entrepreneur, and you have to have somebody taking care of the management details. So I think of the grants that are out there. I guarantee you will never get a grant unless you apply, right? There's no point in grumbling about, oh, look who got this. Well, they applied, and they did the things necessary. And when we're talking about these public agency items, other than a couple of the smaller things that Mariah noted, these aren't grants in the purest sense where you pitch an idea and they give you a check and they say good luck. No, there's a whole lot more accountability with public agencies. So they are contracts, and there are some hurdles. There's a real application involved to make it a fair process. So you've got to weigh what am I going to get out of this against, how much effort has got to go into it, how much of my time is going to go into it, or can I bring somebody in, to help me? So that all goes into that. In my opinion, among the types of things that you folks offer, particularly when there's a cost share involvement, cost share or match, so you've got a $100,000 project and you're going to get $50,000 towards it, the best fit is when it's something you were going to do anyway, right? The grant's not what put you over the top, but it's out there. Take advantage of it. Take advantage, of the process and do that. So I view that as, in the small business world, it's one more thing to be aware of. But when you're going to grow, let's see what's out there and what we can take advantage of. So I'm not a grant writer per se. No one can call me up and say, I want you to write this proposal for me. But in my own work, I write a lot of proposals, and then the people I work closely with. So through some VHCB funding, I facilitate a longer peer group, and those people get, I like to think, a high level of service for me. So I get to know their business as well. In my Vermont Forest Business School program, the same thing. I get to know the people and the business as well. So I will go to them and say, hey, did you see this RFP came out? I know you were thinking about this. It might be a fit. It's never, hey, there's money, you should go after it. It's, I know what your plans are, and there's a match. So in that context, I help people apply for some of these things and written proposals, help some people with the working land standard business grants, and those typically, I know we got rid of the owl slide, but did anyone ever see an owl and then see it with his feathers off? Right, so if you go to Web Grants and you look at the RFP and you look at everything, you say, wow, I can't do this. Then you get looking closely and thinking about it, they're not that bad, right? They're if I know someone's business, we might have 2 solid days in getting that application. And so, you got to get past that initial discouragement and say, oh, I just don't have time for it. The other thing is, I love that the working lands have a relatively short turnaround. That suits me really well. But when they come out, you've got to get on them, right? If you're going to start thinking about it 4 days before, you're not going to pull it off. So there's that. Now, beyond some of the things that we've talked about, and I think Mariah did a great job of showing how much is involved, how much follow-up, everything you've got to put into it. There's other funding out there. And so you mentioned the value-added producer grants. So USDA Rural Development, I've worked with that agency. That's kind of a lesser-known agency. It's terrific. I have nothing but great things to say about the people involved and the level of assistance I've gotten out of that. That's a pretty significant application process. And so I've gone through that process, I think 4 times, or more than 4 times successfully, right? And I worked with someone who had a grant right around one, and then I did the whole thing on the others. You've got to do a SAM registration with the federal government, which means you will get constant reminders to renew it, and you will get an endless stream of spam from people who are trying to convince you need to hire them to do something you can do yourself. But that's a precursor there. When I've been involved with the value-added producer grants, and this is an underused opportunity by forest-based businesses. Loggers are considered producers. Integrated landowners who have a business that go with it, they're producers as well. Producers stand a better chance than there's a second category in there, but maybe you know what it is. But they stand a better chance. I like to take a close look at the levels of funding from year to year and know who I have that might be an applicant. It will take me probably a $5,000 to $7,000 effort to write one of those. So we don't do those lightly. Now in my case, I sometimes have some agency funding that can go towards it. In other cases, when it's a client who I know well, I will do it on speculation. I only get involved with those if I'm going to do some of the planning. But there's a lot of money involved, up to $75,000 for planning and feasibility studies. And if you've got a good business plan with a feasibility study, you can apply for operating funds of up to $250,000. Operating funds are great. You can't buy equipment with them, but you can pay for wood, you can pay for labor, you can do some of those other things. So that's an underused thing that's out there, and you should be aware of it. Okay, so I have just a couple other things I want to throw out there at you. Some of you who are service providers, go back to that pure former grant I talked about. Farm credit, ag enhancement grants. They're not for a lot of money. Farm credit is an awful lot of lending in the forestry sector, and they don't get many forestry applicants. So I've been able to fund some interesting projects that way for amounts of $10,000 for us. So a couple more things to keep in mind. So the funders, the people you work with, by the time you've gotten through their criteria and they have decided to fund you, they're rooting for you. They want you to succeed. With that in mind, there's some significant reporting. So if they have funded you and you've got the money, you've spent the money, right, and you've gotten reimbursed, and they still need something from you, it's pretty disrespectful when people don't reply to emails or phone calls or don't follow up or miss deadlines. So keep in mind, these folks, and probably I'm the best one to say this so you don't have to, have really been in your corner, and you can make them look good and make them look like they have made great choices by following up. And also, they remember that next time. I think they do anyway, so that's good to keep in mind. One quick note about letters of support or letters of commitment. That was mentioned. I know these are important. I had a value-added producer grant that scored just low enough not to get funded. A lot of time in that, and I'm convinced the turning point was we had a letter of support from a major supermarket chain and a very strong commitment from them. It wasn't on their letterhead. That makes a difference. The other thing, and occasionally I see these, hey, would you sign this letter of support? Don't say, you're just insulting the reviewers if you send 10 of the same letter in signed. You've got to have unique letters. You've got to do that. I ask a lot of people for letters of support. I'm always willing to supply a draft. Somebody asks me for one, they have it in 24 hours or less, because I'm going to go to them probably at the last minute and I'm going to want it. So something to keep in mind there. So I work with some people. There's funding out there. Again, the best are those things you were going to do anyway. Take advantage of the opportunities that are out there. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, so now we're going to hear about when this actually happens in real life and how it affects the business. And Lucas, we'll start with you. I don't know if you might need to stand up or not, if you feel comfortable standing, but you might need to project if you're not going to stand.
Okay, I can talk loud.
Okay. So if you want to just start by saying a little bit about your company, and where you are, what you do at your company, and what grant you applied to.
Okay. So the business is the Treehouse Hardwoods Millshop, and we've been in business for since 2014. Our primary business is the sale of lumber, plywood. We sell live edge slabs and some other related products like drawer slides and some finishes and whatnot. We're located in South Burlington, Vermont on Wilson Road, right near the airport. So we've been in business for 7.5 years. So when we were first starting, I'll talk about the first grants because I've actually received 2 grants. The first grant, I don't even know really how to tell this story that well. So one of the suggestions that was made was the importance of getting to know people, your funders and whatnot. So as part of my strategy when I started this business, I sort of got to know everybody in the industry, and I joined associations and boards and just started that process of networking and learning about all of those things. And in the process of doing that, I gained an even greater appreciation for the awesomeness of the local thing that we've got going here in Vermont, and I got really excited about that and the opportunity that my business provided me to participate in that, particularly in sourcing lumber, because we can buy lumber from all sorts of places, and oftentimes we don't know where the lumber comes from that we buy, and I was like, well, that's really not good enough. So the grant that I had originally applied for, and what I had learned is in our journey to find locally sourced wood, is you have to be able to move that wood from wherever it's coming from to our mill shop and store in South Burlington. So I applied for a grant to buy a truck. And it was a really good story that we had to tell because it was around connecting different businesses along that supply chain and benefits to those businesses driven off of the success that we have in selling these things. And we got funded for it, and it was fantastic. So we bought a Ford F550 flatbed diesel, and we've moved a ton of lumber with it. I've created some really great relationships on the bed of that truck, most importantly with Shelburne Farms, which is a managed tree farm. And if you don't know about Shelburne Farms, it's just a really, really cool place. And people think about it as a neat place to go for a walk with their dog and don't realize that the trails that they're walking through when walking that dog along the shores of Lake Champlain is actually a managed tree farm. So we have a relationship with them where we, whenever they do cuttings off of that tree farm, their first call is to us about the lumber that they're cutting and what are they going to do with it. And we put a plan together. And I take that truck down to Shelburne Farms and I pick it up and bring it to typically another business to get kiln dried, and it ends up in our shop. The other one is a relationship that I have with Ken Gagne of Gagne Lumber in Pittsford, Vermont. And that has sort of led to the second grant that we just recently got funded that Lynn Ellen showed a little bit about there. So in developing that, I don't even know how to say this too well. So we have this mill shop, and we had this idea about making butcher block countertops because we have the equipment and the skill to do that. And in developing that relationship with Ken, and the maple that he mills in his mill in Pittsford, we used that material to make butcher block countertops with. And an opportunity came for us to purchase a previously existing brand called the Vermont Butcher Block Company. And that was a business that had folded several years ago. Maybe you were aware of it or not, I don't know. But we let a few years go and some of the bad will of that business dissipate into the air. And so we decided to resurrect that, and through that relationship that we have with Ken, trying to market a Vermont maple butcher block countertop. Trees grown in Vermont, milled in Vermont, trucked by Vermonters, logged by Vermonters, everything happens within the state of Vermont except for kiln drying, which Ken is working on as he's just gotten a kiln set up on his at his mill. So the grant which I applied for was to help us tool up to increase our efficiency and ability to produce Vermont maple butcher block countertops. And it's a really good story because, again, it's a nice thread between multiple businesses being involved in that process, and the work that we're doing with homeowners and end users in taking advantage of this resource that we have of maple trees within the state. So I'm really excited for the money that we're getting from this. It's allowing us to buy, Steve said something really interesting here, which was don't make up a project to apply a grant for. Have a project in mind that you'd like to take advantage of grant funds in order to make it happen better, if I understood what you said, something like that. Yeah, so this is something we're going to do no matter what. It's just a matter of how long is it going to take to do it, and at what level are we going to be able to achieve in doing it. And what this working land grant is allowing us to do is a lot faster than what we would have done if we had just waited to accumulate those funds to be able to afford this equipment. and honestly at a higher level than what I think we would be able to afford if we were just trying to scrape pennies up and figure it out on our own. So I'm really excited for the grant. Thank you so much for that award. It's going to transform our business and the relationship that we have with Ken and the loggers and landowners that he does business with. So it's a really great thing. I'll talk for a few minutes about the process of grant application. So in both of those occasions, I wrote the grant completely myself, and it was a daunting task to get involved in. As you know, I don't know, there's just a lot of questions and a lot of things that you need to figure out, but once you get into it, it's really not that bad. It's just simply questions that you need to provide answers for, and oftentimes those are important questions that if you don't know, you should probably figure out pretty quickly, like the business plan, which I think is probably the most daunting of all of the things that you're asked for within that. And any good business owner should have a business plan, and it's an important thing, and it sort of makes you sort of loop back and think about your business a little bit more strategically, which is a benefit in going through that whole process and making sure that you're going about, doing things in the right way. The letters, so you had also asked a question about the rubric thing, and you said it was sort of hidden, Lynn, which I don't think that it is, because I actually thought that was really obvious within your thing. It actually says, these are the criteria that you're going to be evaluated on, and this is the weight that we apply to that particular question that's on there.
Yeah, well, I think the way that's presented to the reviewer, like you don't see what the reviewer sees, but essentially you see the same thing.
Yeah.
But
yeah. But for an applicant, it was really, really clear, and it's super helpful. So, as I'm putting that grant application together, and this is of course at the 11th hour because I'm a small business, less than 10 people, and I'm busy doing the work and not having the time to actually do this sort of stuff. So it's 10 o'clock at night, and I'm writing this stuff up, and I'm like, oh my God, this letter of support is a really important thing. I think it had a 10-point weight in your your importance of the commitment letter. But luckily, because I had gone through all of this work of networking with other people around the industry, that I have a relationship with Amy Robinson from the Northern Forest Center, and I called her up. It was literally 10 o'clock at night. I was like, Amy, I need a letter of support because this thing, I have to have it submitted by 11 o'clock. And she wrote something up and got it to me really quick, and it was awesome. And I submitted the application, and we were awarded the money, and it's worked out really well. So that's my working lands experience with the whole thing. The other neat thing that the letter of support and commitment does is it forces me to have a conversation with the other stakeholders that are involved in the project that I'm working in. And it lets them know that, hey, I'm really committed to the relationship or whatever it is that I've got going with you, and I would appreciate your support with it. And it kind of created a neat dialogue with them. And also I got a letter, maybe 2 letters of support from customers of ours, asking them to write a letter of support for what we're doing. And it was kind of neat to tell them, like, hey, this is the Working Lands program, and this is a really great thing, and this is what we're doing, and this is what we're committed to, and this is what we're sort of working towards in the future. And they're like, that's awesome. We want to do more business with you because you're doing that stuff. And it's sort of led to a deeper relationship that we have with them, which is cool.
Can I add just something quickly? So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the amount of questions and contact that Lucas made with me at different hours sometimes, and and I try to be as responsive as I can, but I loved that Lucas reached out so much and had so many questions, and sometimes he was just clarifying the answer, but that's really an important part of this, is that connection and that contact. And if he didn't get me, then he'd send another email, or actually Diana knows that, because we have this technological support that happens in web grants, which is a different person other than myself. So I want to applaud you for having a lot of tenacity, because it's very time consuming to have to put yourself out there and ask questions and maybe assume it's not a good question. All questions are good questions. So
basically at the end of the day, to build off of what Steve had said, is I got a 50% discount on some really awesome equipment for my business, and who doesn't want to save 50% on anything that you're buying. And I also look at things as, my hourly labor rate and the amount of time that I spent writing that grant, and there's some follow-up stuff that you definitely have to do with that, but it's basically the equivalent of paying myself $1,000 an hour, maybe more, than that, and it's totally worth the time. And even though it's a daunting task to get involved in, the payback is, tenfold what you get out of it, and the support that's out there so that you're successful in doing it exists, and take advantage of it.
Awesome, thank you.
Very good.
That's really helpful.
Nice.
And Heath, if you want to share, project out to the room.
Oh, I'll do that.
Your business that you applied for,
Yeah.
about your experience.
So my name's Heath Bunnell. I'll go like a little back in time. So I've logged probably 20-something years before I wanted to start a new business, which is Kirby Mulch. Well, I was just always trying to figure out how to keep busy, keep good employees around, how to make a living cutting wood, and so it always means you have to diversify. I can't just cut wood year-round; it's just impossible. But I don't want to lose my men. So this is how it starts, and then so I started running an excavation company as well, and then I'm like, I really kind of had this idea that I wanted to maybe get into the land clearing business and start grinding, because the biomass market was trying to kind of fall apart, and I didn't see how we were going to be able to, work on, landowners' properties and keep that roll going, and and paying them stumpage and thinking so maybe I'm going to have to turn my biomass and my low grades into, a sellable product. And at that point, I thought about mulch. So I, went into this, but so I bought the grinder. So the grinder itself cost $800,000, and I stepped out with literally just throwing it out there. I felt like I didn't know if this was going to work out or anything. I had to buy another excavator to feed it. I was just working the scene, and I realized the only way this is going to really work with the grinder isn't going to go work for other people, is I have to have a yard. I have to have a yard to bring my product back to, and I have to convert it there. A lot of these projects, they don't want any of that you can create more biomass or grindings than you'd ever be able to turn into mulch. So you have to do both. You have to still log, sell what you can, and then what you can't sell or what makes sense to get to the yard to resell. So that's when I saw a property on Route 2 here in Kirby, the same town I live in, and I decided to pursue buying it, and I did. And it was a zoned a commercial site. It had been a business since 1968, rustic brick, and then it had been a welding shop since. But there wasn't any Act 250 permit on the property. So it created a whole, maybe I didn't do my background enough in this, but the site itself, with the traffic it gets, and the area is perfect for what it is. And so anyways, I don't remember who told me about the Working Lands Grant, but I was like, then I proceeded to call Cynthia for help. I tried to buy a woodyard one time, and I was trying to do with Act 250 and run my business myself. And it was just too time consuming. I was literally taking away from my business completely, so I didn't even try to do what Lucas did. I was like, I need help completely. We'll have to have meetings, and Cynthia here, Cynthia Stewart, has just been great for me on that. So what ended up taking place, my initial investment to step out and start this business or this dream or ideas that I have about this yard is, I don't believe, like I bought a live floor, but basically I bought two of them, and Working Lands Grant paid for one. Then I put money towards an old excavator with a stump shear, so I could shear the stumps that come into the yard, get the topsoil out of them, and clean the wood up enough so we can regrind it and turn it into a sellable product. And then had some money left over where I bought a used front end loader with a 10-yard over the top dump, so I don't need to build a ramp. So now, we are able to, with my excavation, logging, and then the mulch yard, we're literally, our byproducts like the soils, the trees, the brush even, comes back to the yard. We grind it, we let it sit for about 6-7 months. The dirt that comes out of the stumps or the waste we have on our excavation jobs is piled. We're screening that, selling that. We're taking our pure biomass product and we're making our colored products. We're buying bark from other mills and mixing it with our all wood product, which comes from just the local area, the local landowners, and we're turning that into, a natural, like a higher grade natural product that we sell. And we're selling and doing business with 50 different companies, local companies in the area. The only product I have in the yard, I don't really know exactly how many products I have, I believe it's 20-something, is the compost is the only thing I outsource. With my site, I didn't have enough room to put even though it's 25 acres, I believe I'm only allowed to use about 4.5 acres of it because of, basically wetlands. Okay. Wetlands and the river corridor issues. And maybe later on we'll be able to revisit those. But, and I meant to say thank you very much for it because, the financial burden, I would have probably kept pushing, but it was just to get through it. But the help that was able to give me just, because it's basically, 3 different businesses that are wrapped into one. So, it was just made it a lot easier for me. And for me, though, a consultant was very, very, very important. Sure. Thank you.
So we only have a few minutes left. There was just a lot of great content to cover, but we have 5 minutes for questions. Anybody has any questions?
Calley, I was going to chime in if it's okay. One of the things I think that was really important, because I know Steve, you told about the letter that you missed something on. I try to get rents in a few days ahead. That would send me over the edge, Lucas. Bless you for doing that, but I would be having a heart attack. But I always call once I get everything submitted and I get to the point of pushing submit. I pick up the phone and call and say, "Can you go down through this with me and just make sure there isn't some big red herring there that I totally missed?" And so I kind of have them do a review, and that gives me a peace of mind that when I push submit, it's all there. Someone has done that extra. So that's been really helpful.
Yeah, and it's important too, because you were such an incredible partner to me in that, we're helping this business get to the finish line. But I can review the components and make sure that everything is there and ready to go, but I'm not going to give my advice on it, right? Because it needs to be an equitable process. Like, my eyes are there just to make sure it's going to operationalize, and you did a fantastic job. I think, there's a lot of silent heroes in this process. You're one of them. I'd say Kat Tolman is another one. Really good grant writers out there. Steve Bick is one. People who have helped some of these enterprises get to the finish line, not just for the application itself, but just the process of being a business, understanding your business, reminding you of the things that you need to take a look at. Cynthia was really instrumental because I wanted to write a story, but then you had an opening day and we were trying to coordinate for you, how that happens. And I know that honestly, just based on, your synergy, that virtual site visit we did, you probably may not have done that, right? I don't know. Maybe.
No, I would have done it.
You would have, okay. So.
But she was like,
yeah,
you should do this. And I'm like, yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, they become like your champions.
Yeah, totally.
So,
I feel like Heath is the visionary. You know, he knows his business and he knows logging. I'm learning about it. I know wood. I'm learning about it. But I'm able to take what he's thinking and can get it on paper so that we can show it to other people. You know, I'm able to be that facilitator to get him where he needs to be. He has the vision. It's just capturing it that I think is the part that a good partner can do for you. But building a relationship with that partner so that they understand what you're thinking. Sometimes I'll get calls from people and they're like, the grant's due in 2 weeks, and they're like, can you help me write this grant? It's like, I don't even know you, I don't know your business. You know, it's a really daunting task to do it at that point. But when you have that wonderful relationship, you kind of can know what they're thinking. Partnership.
In terms of business plans as well, or anything that's submitted in the grant, I think just from that perspective, simple, clear, straightforward. Getting a 30-page business plan is my least favorite thing. I'd much rather a 10-page one where I don't have to be a detective, where it says what it's going to say, and then it says it, and then it says again what it said. And I'm just like, okay, I know exactly what's happening here. And then I can go back in a review committee and say, this is what this business is doing, this is what they want money for. And I think that usually comes back to how clear a business is about who they are as well. That's what gets translated to paper. So more is not always better. You just need to get the key points there and make sure the person, and you could, you know, with a business plan too, or any grant application, like pitch it to somebody who has no idea what you're talking about and see if they can actually interpret what you said or not as a test.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We have a good template on the website now for business plans, and I totally agree. It doesn't need to be a novel. It can be 5 pages. You know, just make sure it has like the operations part of it, or the marketing part of it. It has all the components, and it's really clear, and it matches up with what you're aiming to do. It's much more digestible. It makes more sense.
Any other questions or thoughts? Key takeaways?
It's very helpful, thank you.
Yeah, good.
Very much so.
Yeah, and so resource, just pass that us. Don't miss that. And if anybody is getting the credits, the CFE credits, you should put your name down here. And I'll pass these. Did you get resources? You got them? Yeah. Anything else? Okay. Got them? Okay.
Not really.
And all of our contact info is on there. Everybody up here is super accessible. We'd love to chat with you either about the experience of what it is like to get a grant or what it's like to help with a grant. Please feel free to reach out.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.